All right, everyone, thank you for coming tonight. My name is Aurora Dizell. I'm with the Darby Creek Valley Association, and we are super excited to be hosting the Clean Air Council tonight. We have Russell, Jack, and Eve, and they have prepared a really awesome presentation for you guys, and for me. I'm excited to see it too. So there's some great information in there about what we all can do and keep an eye out for in our watershed. But not just what to look for, but also what we can do, some actionable steps. And that's probably the best part of the whole thing. So I'm going to hand it off to, I think, Russell, you're starting us off.
I am going to begin sharing my screen and then pass it over to my friends Jack and Eve.
Thanks, Russell. All right. So welcome everybody to our webinar on pollution threats in the Darby Creek Watershed. My name is Eve Miari. I'm an advocacy coordinator at the council. We go to the next slide. And so we're your presenters tonight. Actually, we're all advocacy coordinators at the council. Jack Byerly and myself and Russell Zerbo. Many of you are probably familiar with the work of Clean Air Council, but just in case you're not, we've been around since 1967. We're a 501c3 nonprofit environmental organization dedicated to protecting and defending everyone's right to a healthy environment. We run programs in a lot of different areas, from sustainable transportation to clean energy, public health, climate, air quality, watershed, so just sort of hand in everything. And tonight we're focused on watershed protection. We want to start off this evening with a land acknowledgement. So many of you may be familiar with land acknowledgement, or this may be new for you. But since we are talking about the watershed, just taking a moment to acknowledge the land and the original inhabitants of the land. The area that we call the Delaware River Watershed is actually Lenapehoking. It's the historical homeland of the Lenape people. It spans the entire Delaware River Basin, which is New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, into Delaware. The Lenape are the original people in several clans around this area. 80% of Lenape were wiped out from violent conflict and disease when settlers first came to this land from Europe. They experienced broken treaties and broken promises. Many were driven off the land. But many of the water bodies that we talk about and that we work in protecting retain the original Lenape names. So you may be familiar with names like Aquashikala Creek, Neshaminy, Noxamixon, Susquehanna, Tahicken, Wissahickon. These are all the original Lenape names. So I just feel it's important to take a moment to acknowledge the origin of the land and the original people of the land. You can go to the next slide. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Darby Creek Watershed. And we're going to give an overview of sort of the state of the watershed today, and talk about some of the pollution threats to the watershed, which include land development, which we're all familiar with. If you're here, you're living on land development. Illegal dumping, which is a huge problem in the watershed. Legacy contamination, which means contamination sites that are historic. They've been there for decades. And industrial pollution, which is also, unfortunately, all too common. But we will also take some time to talk about next steps and what you can do and what we can all do to better protect the watershed. Next slide. So just a little bit more on the Darby Creek Watershed. It spans 4 counties and 31 municipalities, really big watershed, 120 linear miles, 500,000 residents, drains into the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, and then ultimately flows into the Delaware River because it is part of the Delaware River watershed.
I can take these slides.
Go ahead.
Here.
Go ahead.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Aurora and the Darby Creek Valley Association for hosting us tonight. Just to give you a little bit more of an overview of the state of the watershed. So overall, the watershed today faces a lot of pollution challenges, which we're going to be discussing throughout the webinar tonight. And this map helps convey the urgency of the need to address pollution threats throughout the watershed. So this is a screenshot of the Department of Environmental Protection's 2020 Integrated Water Quality Report viewer, which you can find on DEP's website. Every 2 years, DEP releases a report of its ongoing assessments of water quality of every stream throughout Pennsylvania to identify which bodies of water are meeting their state-assigned water quality standards. So the state assigns every stream a category called a designated use, which defines the water quality goals of the stream and defines limits on the pollution that permit holders like industrial plants or municipal storm sewer systems can discharge into the streams. And the streams that are meeting those water quality goals are called supporting or attaining. And those streams are highlighted in green on this map. And you can see that there aren't too many streams highlighted in green. The streams that aren't meeting their water quality standards and have higher levels of certain types of pollution are shown in red and are called impaired streams or designated impaired. And you can see that the vast majority of streams in the Darby Creek watershed, with the exception of just a couple, he's pointing out the unnamed tributary to Westone Run, which we're going to highlight later, most are impaired, not meeting water quality standards. So there's an urgent need across the entire watershed to maintain the health of supporting waterways and restore the health of impaired waterways. And we're going to be going over some of the causes of impairment, and which brings us to our first pollution topic, land development impacts. Next slide, please. So generally speaking, land development is a major driver of water pollution in the Darby Creek watershed due to the loss of forests, meadows, and the paving of natural ground cover with impervious surfaces. So the diagram on the left illustrates what happens to precipitation when it falls on natural ground cover versus paved impervious areas. So when precipitation occurs, ideally, it would soak into the natural ground cover, flow through the soil, get absorbed up by the roots and the trees and vegetation, which act as sponges for stormwater, or it would percolate down to the groundwater. But when land is developed and the surface is paved, the precipitation isn't able to soak into the ground. It flows over the roadways, over paved surfaces, over fertilized lawns, picking up and carrying all sorts of pollutants as it flows and eventually flows into waterways. And as you well know, flooding is a major issue in the Darby Creek watershed because when precipitation isn't able to seep into the ground, high volumes of water enter local streams and rivers all at once. So on the right side of the slide, you'll see a model of the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, from a report of theirs showing past, present, and future land uses of the greater Philadelphia region. And in that leftmost panel, you see showing the region in 1900. Most of the area consisted of forests and wetlands, but by 2010, shown in the middle panel, most of these areas were converted into low and high density urban areas with more impervious surfaces. And the final panel, we see a model projection of future land uses in 2100 with even fewer forested areas, more urban development, more impervious surfaces. And this illustrates why stormwater management is such a major concern, not only in the Darby Creek watershed, but also throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. So since much of the land development in the watershed occurred before environmental regulations were in place, wetlands were filled and developed over, and many areas alongside streams that were natural floodplains have been paved over. As a result, stormwater runoff from development in the upper reaches of the watershed, as well as along streams throughout the watershed, has contributed to major flooding issues, especially in downstream areas. So in 2012, the Philly Inquirer called Darby Creek one of the country's most flood-prone streams. And the flooding not only ravages people's homes and neighborhoods, it's incredibly costly to local governments to deal with cleanups and to deal with the damage to infrastructure. And so now with the impacts of climate change, bringing wetter and more frequent rain events, flooding issues in downstream areas of the watershed will likely continue and worsen. These are both pictures from Tropical Storm Isaias this past summer in August 2020. So since flooding is a major issue, this is all the more reason to take necessary steps need to be taken at the local and the regional level to manage stormwater. Next slide, please. So let's take a closer look at the different pollutants that stormwater runoff carries and how they affect water quality. The first we want to highlight is sediment runoff. So sediment harms aquatic habitats in a number of ways, The sediment can clog the gills of fish. It clouds the water, reduces the amount of light that aquatic plants need for photosynthesis, and that subsequently reduces the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water, which animals need in order to breathe. And the sediment buildup can also physically alter the stream itself by reducing the aquatic habitats in stream beds, and also bury wetlands that are next to streams. And the sediment can also carry other pollutants, like the three pollutants that are, the pollutants that follow. Nutrients are typically come from, chemical fertilizers and manures are major sources of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus pollution. And nutrient pollution can cause algae blooms in waterways. And algae blooms are especially harmful because they not only clog the gills of fish, they block sunlight, but when the algae dies off, the decay process of the algae reduces the amount of oxygen in the water. The bacteria gobble up all the oxygen, and this leads to eutrophication and oxygen depletion, and can cause fish kills. Pesticides can wash into waterways. They can kill off plants and insects that are food sources for fish and other aquatic life. Heavy metals like cadmium, copper, lead, mercury, nickel, chromium, zinc, they can come from the dust from automobile tires, automobile exhaust, road asphalt, and it can also wash off from industrial areas and agricultural areas. And heavy metals they can contaminate drinking water sources. They can also harm fish. Fish absorb these metals into their gills, and ingesting too many fish with high levels of metals can affect the nervous system. That's why you'll see like suggested limits on the amount of fish, eating certain amounts of fish. Road salts and oils. Road salts are especially a rising problem in the watershed. Sodium chloride can be picked up by runoff and can harm aquatic life. And plastics are also a major issue. They can break down in the water and become microplastics. These tiny plastic particles can be ingested by fish and aquatic life and can end up in the water we drink. And I know that Logan, who's listening on the call, Logan has been a strong advocate for the plastic bag bans in Philadelphia, and that's why this plastic bag ban legislation is very important, as it will have a big impact on the health of our waterways. Next slide, please. So there's a real urgency for stormwater management to be a major priority because climate change will only exacerbate the impacts we're already seeing with stormwater runoff and flooding. So you can see in these charts showing that in the past few decades, rainfall averages and annual temperatures have both been rising. Studies show that the anticipated trend is for the watershed to be warmer and wetter in the future. The rise in temperature means that there'll be less precipitation stored as snowpack during the winter, and runoff from snowmelts will flow into waterways at greater rates. Also, with climate change, weather events are predicted to be more extreme. So there will be higher intensity storm events and also droughts that are short in duration but are severe. So in addition to sea level rise projected with climate change, the flow rates into waterways will be greatly altered and will lead to more frequent flooding and also more frequent drought events. Next slide, please. So with new land development comes more people, and with more people, naturally, we have to develop systems to handle human waste and everything that gets flushed down our toilets and drains. So there are two types of sewer systems, separate and combined. In areas that were developed and grew a lot in the 20th century tend to have separate sewer systems. And areas that were developed longer ago and had a lot of development growth in the 19th century tend to have combined sewer systems. Now, most of Darby Creek actually uses separate sewer systems. And in a separate sewer system, waste flushed down drains from buildings. It flows into a sanitary sewer system that transports the sewage to treatment plants. And the stormwater within the area, all the stormwater that's collected from the roads, it flows into a completely separate storm sewer system that carries the water untreated directly into a waterway. Now in a combined sewer system, the same set of pipes collects all the sewage from the buildings and all the stormwater and sends it all this water to treatment plants before it is discharged into waterways. So all this water is getting sent to a treatment plant, which sounds great, but during heavy storms, the sewer system and the treatment plants reach full capacity, and all the stormwater and sewage can get dumped untreated into waterways in what is called a combined sewered overflow, or a CSO. So you'll see on the map on the right, the area along Cobb's Creek is served by a combined sewer system. And the map on the right shows the locations of all the combined sewer system outfalls, the areas where the combined sewer overflows are discharged. And this website is CSOcast. It's run by the Philadelphia Water Department. It tells you the current status of the CSOs, whether they've overflowed in the past 24 hours or whether they're currently overflowing. And this is a screenshot from a rainy day in early May. You can see that one of the outfalls on Cobb's Creek has discharged in the past 24 hours. In 2011, just worth noting, the city of Philadelphia initiated their Green City Clean Waters Plan, which is a 25-year plan to reduce the volume of stormwater entering combined sewers by constructing green infrastructure projects like rain gardens throughout the city, and also expanding stormwater treatment capacity and gray infrastructure. So overall, the plan seeks to use green infrastructure to reduce the volume of polluted stormwater runoff entering the sewer system and waterways by 85% by 2036. So this plan is, it's looking to both deal with stormwater and at the same time make Philadelphia's neighborhoods greener, more vibrant places to live, work, and play. So all that being said, what can we do to take action? Let's dive into some of the ways to take action at the local level to reduce pollution impacts from land development and stormwater runoff. And it makes sense to start with what you can do at home. So there are a number of stormwater management tools that you can install on your own property. One thing you can look into is obtaining and installing a rain barrel. A rain barrel is a storage container that you can connect to your downspout to capture stormwater from your roof. You can then use this water to water plants. It's a good way to save on your water bill. Keep in mind that the water collected from the roof can have leaf litter, bird droppings, and other nasty things in the roof. So it's best to use this water on inedible plants such as the lawn or flowers. Another thing you can do is plant a rain garden on your property. You can plant a rain garden in a depressed area on your property to collect stormwater from the roof downspouts and nearby impervious areas, and allow the water to soak into the ground and have the plants and soil filter the pollutants and prevent stormwater and all of the pollutants from entering the storm sewer system. There are lots of free guides you can find online on how to plant a rain garden. I just want to share this one from the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. There's a link to it on the right. It shows you everything from figuring out where to plant a rain garden to the types of plants you could choose from. You can also have a downspout connect to a planter, which can absorb stormwater. You can also replace impervious paved surfaces on your property with pavers or stones or bricks that allow the water to soak into the ground below. Next slide, please. So there's lots of programs and resources available to help you figure out what you can do on your property to better manage stormwater. And some programs actually help you cover the costs of putting these stormwater management tools in place. So if you live in Philadelphia, you can take advantage of the Rain Check program, which is funded by the Philadelphia Water Department and managed by the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. You can attend a virtual workshop, learn what stormwater management tools will be best for your property. And after attending a workshop, you can even make an appointment with an assessor from the program to come out and help you determine which tools are right for your property. So this program will help you cover some of the costs of installing these stormwater management tools. After attending the workshop, you can request a free rain barrel and they'll help you install it. And also the program will give you up to $1,500 towards covering the cost of installing a rain garden or permeable pavers in your yard. The Stream Smart House Calls program. This is a program that serves numerous regions surrounding Philadelphia and in the Darby Creek Watershed. This program is managed by the Darby Creek Valley Association. You can contact the program and schedule an appointment and have a professional conduct a free audit of your property to identify changes you can make or stormwater management tools you can use to reduce stormwater runoff leaving your property. And they can also provide you with a free rain barrel when they conduct the audit. There's also the Pennsylvania Resources Council. They often collaborate with municipalities across the watershed, offer lots of helpful resources on their website. They also offer great webinars on stormwater management tools. When you look at the sign-up page for upcoming webinars, you'll see that when you participate in the webinars, you can be eligible to receive a free rain barrel. So if you're interested in learning more about what you can do at home, check out these programs, or at the very least, check out their websites. They have lots of helpful information and resources and reports on their web pages. Next slide, please. So now we're going to take a look at what can be done at the municipal level to reduce pollution impacts from land development and stormwater runoff. So every town has its own municipal regulations. It has its own zoning code, which regulates the development of land and where different uses like industrial uses and residential and commercial uses can be located in the municipality. And each municipality has its own regulations regarding where development can take place in relation to nearby waterways. So every municipality has to adopt a stormwater management ordinance, which is modeled after a state-approved stormwater management plan. But municipalities can choose to adopt regulations that go above and beyond the state's baseline requirements. So one of the most simple and effective ways municipalities can reduce pollution in waterways is to adopt a riparian buffer ordinance. And a riparian buffer ordinance can prohibit development or the construction of new buildings within a specified distance of a waterway. And a riparian buffer ordinance can also require developers to restore riparian areas, the areas alongside waterways, by planting trees and shrubs. So maintaining a healthy riparian buffer has a multitude of benefits. By planting vegetation alongside waterways, the riparian buffers can help stabilize stream banks and minimize erosion. The buffer area can intercept pollutants that are carried by stormwater runoff and remove the excess nutrients, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and other that would otherwise enter the local waterways. It absorbs those nutrients in the plants. The buffers can also reduce flooding downstream by absorbing and slowing the flow of stormwater. The vegetation provides shade, which helps control the stream temperature and prevents elevated temperatures from harming aquatic life. A major question is, how wide should riparian buffer be? And there's lots of different studies on the effectiveness of riparian buffers of different widths. A study that's often cited is one by the Stroud Water Research Center, which says that a forested buffer should be at least 30 meters or nearly 100 feet to adequately protect the health of a stream. But virtually all these studies recognize that the wider the buffer is, the greater the benefits. So you see in that image on the right, there's the diagram showing how the benefits increase with the width of the buffer. And riparian buffer ordinances, or they're typically called riparian conservation overlays, may be difficult to implement in areas that are already heavily developed or built out and already have lots of development near waterways. But it's important to note that these ordinances can be adapted to fit these municipalities depending on the municipality's development goals or constraints that it may have. So for example, in Abington, in Montgomery County, just outside the Darby Creek watershed, in the Wissahickon watershed, they adopted a riparian corridor conservation overlay, a riparian buffer ordinance, even though it's a built out municipality. The buffer requirements only apply to lots that are over 1 acre in size. So residents with smaller properties that may oppose the ordinance, that may otherwise oppose riparian buffer ordinance and feel that it's restricting the use of their property, that's typically the largest reason for opposition is smaller properties may feel like they aren't able to develop sufficiently given the constraints. But because Abington was able to work around this issue, they were able to have the ordinance only apply to properties that are over 1 acre in size. So they were able to institute this requirement for larger properties that might have be institutional properties or properties that have schools on them or larger businesses. So this prevents those properties from developing additional buildings or installing impervious surfaces along the streams. Next slide, please. So another local regulation that municipalities can adopt and residents can advocate for are requiring new and redeveloped parking lots to incorporate stormwater management best practices and improve tree planting and landscaping requirements. So as you know, Delaware County has a wealth of surface parking lots, and municipalities can adopt improved standards for these seas of blacktop that cause lots of stormwater runoff for oils and road salts and heavy metals with oils and all these other pollutants. So the Montgomery County Planning Commission published a guidebook for municipalities called the Sustainable Green Parking Lots Guidebook, which contains recommendations on features that parking lots can include. and standards municipalities can adopt. And these include standards for planting areas, strips of greenery, tree islands, standards for vegetated areas along the perimeter of the parking lot to collect the rainwater with bioretention methods and allow the water to be absorbed by the plants. And they also, these regulations could include incentives for using permeable pavement materials like interlocking concrete pavers and gridded systems that reduce impervious surfaces and allow the rainwater to soak through the parking lot surface. Next slide, please. So another important thing that municipalities can do is to work alongside conservation organizations like local or regional land trust organizations to protect open space and natural areas near waterways and in areas where stormwater runoff can be captured and percolate into the soil before it flows into the waterway. So the protection of open space is especially important in the upper reaches of the watershed to prevent flooding downstream. And in ideal situations, municipalities can be proactive and plan to protect open space areas near waterways. Municipalities may develop open space plans and work alongside land trust organizations to purchase identified properties or purchase easements on the properties to prevent development within a certain distance of a waterway. However, in many situations, municipalities may lack resources, or there may be a circumstance where all of a sudden the property is slated for redevelopment and the residents of the municipality have to figure out how the development can either be prevented or whether the development's impacts on the watershed could be reduced. So this picture, this shows this is from the Delaware County Daily Times. It shows the Donguanella Forest in Marple Township. This is a wooded property that was owned by the Archdiocese. It surrounds a tributary to Whetstone Run, and the woods are filled with walking trails. That are beloved by the community. It contains one of the last remaining old growth forests in the region. And there was a proposal to develop 141 homes on 89 acres of the property, and concerned residents organized a local group called Save Marple Green Space to fight the development. And Save Marple Green Space connected with advocacy organizations, including Darby Creek Valley Association, Delaware River Keeper Network, and the Clean Air Council to form a coalition called the Whetstone Run Coalition. So there's an ongoing effort to prevent development. The coalition has helped urge the Marple Board of Supervisors to deny the development plans. These organizations hired a land use attorney to present to the Board of Supervisors and how the development doesn't follow the regulations of the town zoning code. They also obtained input from stormwater management specialists on the shortcomings of the developers' stormwater management plans. So this will be an ongoing effort. But if there is a major development planned along a waterway, know that you can reach out to environmental organizations like Darby Creek Valley Association, like Clean Air Council, like Delaware River Keeper Network, to explore ways to organize to protect the health of the waterways. Okay. And now I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Russell Zerbo, who's going to be presenting on illegal dumping.
Thanks, Jack. That was great. And just in a footnote to the road salt bit, I believe our friends in the state legislature approved some legislation today to allow hydraulic fracturing waste to be used as road salt in various communities. So we're talking a lot about, reaching out to your local government. Local governments are one of the main users of road salts in terms of, just broad applications of that. So they may be getting their road salt from, Morton Salt, or they may be getting it from a hydraulic fracturing operation. So you might want to check into that. Okay, we're going to talk about illegal dumping. And I wanted to, when we were putting this presentation together, Eve made a really amazing point that led us to highlighting illegal in this situation, because there is legal dumping, and it's a hugely necessary part of our world to properly dispose of waste. So I do not want you to take this presentation as, against all waste products, because the whole intention of it is to properly dispose of your waste. And you might refer to that as legal dumping. But now we're going to talk about illegal dumping. It is confusing because you can report it to a variety of agencies. And it's doubly confusing because in the Darby Creek in Delaware County, we have so many small municipalities, and those municipalities truly get to decide what types of complaints they are going to receive, which is why I show these two screenshots of various complaint reporting portals. The state, the state is a catch-all. If you're in the state of Pennsylvania, you can report something to DEP. If you're in the city of Philadelphia has all of its own structures depending on what the complaint is. And then depending on your township in Delaware County, they have different structures. And I just thought this was interesting because, Darby Township is not specifically calling out illegal dumping. They have a report a concern page. And I think if you went down, different townships in the Darby Creek or in Delaware County, you would see a series of different languages about the types of complaints that they receive or not receive. So it's really important to get to know your local township and to figure out how exactly they're dealing with those complaints. And it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, which is one of the points of this whole presentation, is to just get our information out here so we can help you figure out. You might call this a bureaucratic issue. And the point of the whole situation is that it goes somewhere. Particularly, we are in a low-lying coastal area with all sorts of streams and tributaries and creeks, and it all ends up kind of in that bay where the Delaware meets the Schuylkill, where the John Hines Wildlife Refuge is. And dumping and litter takes many forms. It could be a pile of 100 tires. It could be the lifetime accumulation of plastic bags, and it all ends up in our part of Southwest Philly. And there's two really important things to highlight here. The longer a waste product sits in our environment, the more it disperses its pollutants. And it was mentioned, plastics break down and just get smaller and smaller and get inside fish and other wildlife. So it's really incorrect to think that you sort of lose control over the situation as that, plastic bag is falling out of your hand. That's why we do cleanups. It's because even we need to get that stuff out of there, because it will just accumulate and keep getting worse. And tires are just one of the worst offenders. Environmentally speaking, they do not break down. They are largely made of oil. They hold water for mosquitoes. And then even you might not realize that furniture and mattresses all have paint and chemicals and fire retardants on them. And again, as they sit in our atmosphere, or not our atmosphere, or as they sit in our environment, they just continue to leach those out in perpetuity. So there's always a good reason to clean that stuff up. And our friends at the Darby Creek Valley Association have our similar thought, and they have also put together kind of a repository of different people to call. And now Delaware County, in its newfound environmental ambition, its environmental crimes unit is taking reports. You can call 911 in an emergency situation. And the really interesting thing, and something by January 2022, Delaware County should have its own public health department. And they will likely have some sort of a complaint mechanism. So, you could consider it as getting more complicated, or you consider it as, having more support. And most of my complaints that I get are within Philadelphia, but I've gotten all sorts of complaints across Pennsylvania. And I like to think I have the ear of at least some governmental officials, or at least the patience to deal with it. So please feel free to reach out with photographs, addresses, concerns, confusions. All of this stuff is really tough. It's hard to find an address for these properties. It really takes a lot of patience to figure this stuff out, and we're more than willing to offer that. So let's take a breath before. I think we're doing really, really well on time. Everybody in the chat seems to be comfortable. So we'll talk about a different form of illegal dumping, which is the various waste products that are in our ground. It is, Philadelphia, Delaware County. We are in the cradle of American democracy. We've been around for a long time. There's a lot of old stuff. And nobody really feels the need to tell you about this stuff because it's not really that fun to talk about. And just to give you an idea of, the timeline for these issues, there's been industry in this area since, the 18th century. And the law that governs it is Act 2 of 1995. So that should give you an idea of kind of the mismatch in these time periods. And then it's also really important to consider that Act 2 of 1995 is a state law. It is not a local ordinance. It is not administered by your county. Even in Pennsylvania's only first-class city, Philadelphia, and that's not first class like an airplane. It's like that's an actual term, a first-class city. Even a city like that has its own school district and its own water department and air management services, land health is still governed by the state of Pennsylvania. It's actually a big problem in the city of Philadelphia is that we have a public health department and all these other agencies, but they just never created a land health agency. So it's administered by the state. And that can be a really difficult situation. Elected officials are not jumping to tell you that they have no control over this process. And local officials just don't, which is a really kind of a scary thing to think about. But as soon as you know that and can kind of start to be proactive about that, in a lot of situations, unfortunately, you cannot rely on your township to give you this information because, you might be giving it to them. Act 2 of 1995 is Pennsylvania's land recycling law, and it is administered at the state level. And something really, really important, if you get nothing from this presentation, consider dust pollution from these sites. Because on one hand, analyzing the lead and cadmium content of an old industrial site is, it's largely above my pay grade and lots of other people's. It's super technical to think about. And, as your average resident, it's very intimidating. But on the flip side of that, all you have to do is know that a property is contaminated and know the phone number to call. Any dust migrating off that property is illegal. Full stop. And it's not even like an environmental issue. It's just a property rights issue. These facilities do not have air permits. They are not legally allowed to send things into the air. So if you see dust crossing one property line, if you see dust leaving a property, that is illegal, literally the property line. And you have to make that call. That is most likely a state complaint, unless you are in fact in the city of Philadelphia. That's actually a really good example of how complicated this stuff is. The city of Philadelphia doesn't govern land contamination, but as soon as that land contamination becomes airborne, it is under its governance. So sit with that for a moment. So it's really, it's just really complicated, but to kind of cut through the static there, just be paying attention to your nearby development, especially if it's on an old industrial site. And, don't be shy about making that dust complaint. Again, you can email me and I can help you make it. And then it gets super confusing because, active industrial sites like Marcus Hook are sometimes so old that they are also historic legacy land contamination sites. That is hard to wrap your head around, but it is true. And there's, EPA documents to support that. And this is an example of a specific EPA cleanup in Marcus Hook. And the reason why I wanted to show this is because I don't know if people realize how obscure these timelines can be. If you can read this at the bottom, they started looking at this site in 1986 and remediation has not begun. And it's not because, it's a work and like they're doing this. It just takes a really long time. In some cases go at different speeds. So the point of this is, there's no assumption to be made about these types of land cleanups. It could be over the course of 40 years. It could be over the course of 5 years. And we're even dealing with absurd cases in Philadelphia right now where they're proposing to redevelop sites they remediated 10, 20 years ago, which is like pretty dumbfounding for me. It's like, why did you spend 30 years and millions of dollars if you're just now going to get rid of all this nice green stuff that you put in? Another thing you may not realize about land contamination sites is that they are usually only cleaned up related to a land use change or a new development. Nobody is, walking around with their magnifying glass looking for abandoned land cleanup sites to remediate for fun.
Which, Russell, that's exactly what's happening on the slide you just showed before in Marcus Hook. They're finally looking at remediating that site because there's a buyer interested in developing the site.
Exactly. And it's a really tough situation. The Act 2 of 1995 is almost only triggered by a land use change, industrial to residential. And that makes sense, in industry has one standard, residential has another. So yeah, I would keep that in the front of your mind. When you see a zoning change, when you see a redevelopment, that's the time to start thinking about, oh, well, what used to be there? And I actually found a really cool website today that just shows old maps. And one of the cool things about really old maps is they will actually give you little designs of what used to be there. That's the way they used to draw maps. So there's a lot of fun stuff to be found there. Thanks, Steve. That is, it happens all the time and it's so counterintuitive. So this is kind of the flip side of that situation. If you're not, if you don't have your eye on a redevelopment case and you're just trying to check out your neighborhood, this is a great website that DEP has. You can type in your county, you can type in your town, and it will show you, all the underground storage tanks that they're aware of, other land cleanups. There's almost too much stuff on this map to make sense of, as you see all the different icons. But if you were just looking at your neighborhood and you zoomed in, it would be a little clearer. But I thought it was kind of fun to show you all these different icons and images. And this whole slide deck will be available with all these links, or reach out over email, or even, you can add, like, we're not putting the pressure on you to use all these kind of dense tools. So we're happy to, if you want to know what's in your town, we'll give you a little wrap up. And this is an even more in-depth tool. It doesn't give you the mapping, but I thought it was really cool that, not only can you see what's being remediated, you can see the exact contaminants, the different limits. One of the worst parts of Act 2 is that you are allowed to have what is called a site-specific standard, which is literally a regulation that they made because some sites are so polluted that there's just, I think there's always hope to bring it to a safe level. But some people, how shall I say this? They set a lower bar for themselves, and the state has obliged. And that sounds good when you hear it site specific, but when you see site specific, that means it's dirtier than the normal state standard, because it is so contaminated. So that's something to consider. All right, I hope all that makes sense. I know these are really big issues. And interestingly enough, one of the largest Superfund sites in the United States is right in the Darby Creek watershed. It's right in Southwest Philly. I'm talking about the Lower Darby Creek Superfund site. It is the combination of the old Clearview landfill and the Fulcroft landfill, in Clearview and Fulcroft, funnily enough. Clearview landfill was originally known as Heller's Dump, if you were around when that was actually a functioning dump. And this is a really contaminated site. All sorts of governments have been, what would be the word, incriminated in various dumpings here. The city of Philadelphia was illegally dumping its own trash there for decades, literally breaking into the site to dump. And a lot of people don't realize this, but the John Hines Wildlife Refuge is the Fulcroft landfill. When you're at the John Hines Wildlife Refuge, you are in a Superfund site, an unremediated Superfund site. That's why those boardwalks are there, so that you're not in it. That is a pathway. They're trying to block the exposure pathway with those boardwalks. And they're still, they're still trying to figure out who they're going to bill for all of that, which is pretty scary to think about. And even weirder to think about is that this site was potentially going to be a lot larger because there's all sorts of other industry in the area. The Essington area, also highly industrial. So when EPA was looking at it, they were really looking at kind of declaring a large portion of the Darby Creek a Superfund site. Then they kind of decided that that was a bit much. So they focused on these two illegal landfills. And I work a lot in Eastwick. I get these emails. I wanted to show y'all a nice email because previously to this, every email was just about them digging up people's lawns. For the last 3 or 5 years, the Environmental Protection Agency has literally been digging up people's lawns in Southwest Philly. And it's really important to mention that the lawns that they're digging up are the vast majority African-American residents that were purposely housed by a real estate company around this contaminated site. That is not me saying that. There was a lawsuit in the late 80s where residents got settlements. In that case, the real estate company purposely housed African-Americans around the Superfund site and did not tell them. And now the EPA is spending millions of dollars to dig up their lawns and, like you're seeing here, planting trees. So this is real stuff that happens. This is not an academic presentation. So again, one of the sites that was possibly included in that Superfund site is the Sunoco's Darby Tank Farm. That is right on the Darby side of the creek opposite Philadelphia. This is an example of some work that we've been doing in the past couple years around renewed stormwater permits at these sites. And, they need to, it could be a Superfund site. I was finding all of these reports about, just decades of contamination at this site. And the state is so quick to reapprove, the same stormwater permit that they've had for the last 30 years. And obviously because of climate change and other development, I think we should reevaluate stormwater every year because it's different. Water is different, development is different. But the flip side of that is the state is approving the same, sometimes 30-year-old stormwater permits. And so, combine climate change, development, and existing contamination at those sites. And it's pretty rough to think about. I feel like everyone is very aware of this spill into the Darby Creek a couple years ago. And it's really important to point out this spill was reported by residents. It's not reported by Sunoco. It was not reported by DEP. This is from a call from residents that says something smells weird. I've personally looked at Sheen reports from the Philadelphia refinery in the Schuylkill River. If something smells weird, if you're seeing reflective, shiny things in water, pick up the phone. It could be something incredibly serious. I take no joy in this. There's so much pressure put on residents to take these kinds of actions. But it's just what we have to do. There's no other way to put it. So again, please don't, I am not trying to start a campaign against the Linwood Elementary School in Havertown, PA. But I just thought this was an interesting example of how you can look up local permitting information You know, you probably don't even know that an elementary school has to get a Clean Water Act permit for their stormwater. And then they're somehow not in compliance for that. I wonder what they're doing over there. This is a great website, EPA Echo. Just Google EPA Echo or use this link, type in your zip code, and it just gives you a list of all the permitted sites in your area, their permit numbers, whether they're in compliance or not, whether they're being inspected or not. This is really cool, fairly accessible stuff. And again, we can help you use these websites. This is a breakdown of what we've been showing you and some other ones. A lot of really great resources out there. You just have to know where to look. We are doing decent on time. I'm going to pick up the pace slightly. This is another really cool DEP water pollution tool. Just the same thing. If I was looking at, you know, Linwood Elementary and say, oh, they're not complying for their Clean Water Act permit, I can then go find them in this. And like you see here, that highlight in yellow means an exceedance of their water permit for pH, for anything. Jack was talking about combined sewer overflows. There are standards for fecal coliform. So yeah, you can really find this stuff out. But obviously, you know, this is maybe not the most user-friendly website. So try to be patient and please just reach out to us if you are trying to get some information. Again, this is a really cool website. We use this for writing grants and reaching out to local municipalities, doing all sorts of interesting work. It's scary to think about. The Philadelphia airport is covered by the colors on this site. It's a very large place, the Philadelphia airport, and they are, you know, in the flood zone. They are firmly in the flood zone. I mean, this is a good tool if you're buying a house. This is a good tool for lots of things. And you may be, you know, shocked to see some of these descriptions. The Norwood landfill is a big issue. EPA is looking at it. I don't have a ton to say about it, other than, you know, EPA's active case on it. But the thing I really wanted to highlight in terms of, you know, the big issue here, I hope you're receiving, is that we are, you know, we're trying to connect you with government. That is how I describe Clean Air Council in a really brief way. You know, we're trying to help you work with government or speak to government in a way that is supportive for you. So they're looking for narratives and accounts of people with cancer and other diseases. This is how they put together those studies. So if you have family or know people in the Norwood area, check this out. Okay, great. I really appreciate everyone's time and attention.
All right, we're going to wrap this up with next steps. So we can go to the next slide. We're going to talk about actions that you can take, which we've heard a lot of tonight from both Russell and Jack. But additionally, you can always find actions on the Clean Air Council website. If you go to cleanair.org action items, there's always a list of actions there that you can take. And if you don't want the extra added step of going to the website and looking for actions, you can sign up for our action alerts. They will come directly to your email and let you know when you can get involved around something like a spill into Darby Creek or a spill into Marsh Creek, when comments are needed to DEP or EPA or to whomever we are, whatever regulatory agency we are targeting for comments. So I guess here's an example of an action alert that we did recently. I think Jack mentioned Whetstone Run is sort of the last high quality tributary in the Darby Creek watershed, and a number of groups have been working to protect Whetstone Run, to upgrade its status to the status that reflects the quality of the water. So we've done some actions around that, and we've done other actions around Delcora, which is the sewage incinerator in Chester, Marcus Hook area. We've done actually a couple different ones around Chester and Marcus Hook and Trainer around NIPD's permits, which are water discharge permits. So these are the types of actions that you can find on the website or receive by email so that you can get involved. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, Russell, Jack, and I are advocacy coordinators. And so we are here to be your advocates, to consult with you around pollution concerns that you might have in your local neighborhood, community, municipality. We can support individuals in organizing within a municipality if there are groups of concerned residents who have concern about a particular site or a particular pollution source. We can support you in advocating to your township council. We've worked with residents around draft resolutions, draft ordinances, and we can also support you in reaching out beyond the local municipality to the conservation district, to the PADEP, commenting on permitting periods and applications and things of that nature. And so we just wanted to put up our faces again, but mostly so you could just see our emails, which are listed at the bottom. So if you want to get in touch with Jack or myself or Russ, these are our emails at Clean Air. And we have a few minutes that we can take questions and hopefully provide answers. So just process-wise, if you had a question while you were watching the webinar tonight, you can put that question in the chat and we will answer it. Also, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little icon that says reaction. So if you click on reaction and then you click on raise hand, oops, I just did clap, such a bad demonstration. If you click on raise hand, then we'll know that you have something to say and we can unmute you and you can ask your question.
And I think people can just unmute themselves.
Yeah, you can. You can unmute yourselves and just ask your question too.
A lot of trust we put in the and everyone was wonderfully behaved. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. My name is Virginia, and I work with several schools in and around Center City, Philadelphia. And we're looking specifically for several of the schools, middle school and high school levels, for kind of citizen science types of projects really that would connect to watersheds and stream health, and didn't know if you knew of any or could recommend kind of steps to start framing curriculum around these issues instead of just doing like a cleanup, but really building kind of data collection and also like the policy and all those different layers. If you had any thoughts or recommendations or schools that are doing that, that could be a good example. I'd really appreciate it.
That's a very good question. As far as programs to reach out to, Penn State Extension has a program called the Master Watershed Steward program that they have in counties throughout Pennsylvania. And I'm not sure if they have been doing engagement with schools specifically. I know that they have programs in each county where adults can, participate, join, go to lectures, and then they have to fulfill a certain number of volunteer hours each year, which they can fulfill through participating in citizen science projects, stream monitoring, cleanups, but also, other projects beyond cleanups, like what you're looking for. So the Master Watershed Steward program is a good program to reach out to. The Stroud Water Research Center does a lot of stream monitoring in the area, and they may have some citizen science projects going on that they could connect you with, or they may be able to connect you with another organization that has stream monitoring going on.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention Stroud. Not only do they have educational programs, I think they're a good one to connect with too. They also have like retreats just specifically for teachers, just to like educate teachers and create community around that and give you curriculum and support for that. So yeah, good recommendation there.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, I have it's not water, but I do a air monitoring citizen science project in Philly.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to present. I'm actually presenting it to the Kensington Health Sciences Academy
Okay.
in a couple weeks. It's not yet. The water quality monitors haven't progressed like low cost air monitors have. So if you want to talk about air too.
No, definitely, because I'm thinking like for one of the schools, it's a way of kind of connecting their environmental chemistry unit to like meaningful action. So yeah, land, air, water.
Check out this this company, Purple Air. I just put their website in the chat. That's what we use, and it's we buy the monitors. I have a couple with grant funding, and you are live on the internet. You can, if you go to purpleair.com/map right now, you can literally see every monitor running on planet Earth. And then if you zoomed into Philly, you would see some that myself and others have installed. It's pretty cool.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think Susan has a hand up.
Hi, yes, I work at Cobbs Creek Community Environmental Center. And I wanted to let the woman that just spoke know that the University of Pennsylvania, it hasn't started yet, but they plan on starting to use our building to do water, like what she's talking about, through the Penn Water Center. So that should be coming maybe in a year or so. Programs for junior high and high school kids dealing with water quality. And also the Fairmount Park, the Fairmount Waterworks, they have a whole curriculum on water, watersheds, the stormwater system in the area. So that's another place to look.
Great, thank you.
If Fairmount will also do field trips there, if that's something you were interested in. It's pretty cool.
And Virginia, I dropped this in the chat, but Land Health Institute works in the Cobbs Creek area. And Scott Stokely, I think is his name, the executive director, has worked a lot with schools.
Cattell. Scott Cattell.
Cattell, thank you.
Yeah, Cattell. And yeah, no, thank you. I didn't know that they were. So one of the schools that I'm working with is up in Parkside, and their nursery is just off of Parkside. So, but I didn't know that they were doing. Yeah, I sense Scott is kind of like ubiquitous in this area. So thank you. I didn't know that.
Was this helpful? Was this what people wanted?
I thought so.
Thank you, Aurora.
Yeah, actually, I really loved personally. I wrote down that CSO cast. Is that what it was called? That's fantastic, because I often have people asking me about the safety of letting their kids go in the streams. Because lots of kids, including my own, like to splash and play, and I always, I want to encourage that and exploration and getting wet out there, but with the little note that maybe not 48 hours after a big storm. So that's depending on what creek you're talking about, right? So that tool seems like a helpful one there.
Funny that
I wanted to thank you guys because I thought it was great. A lot of information in there. So I think it would be good to send out some of these resources afterwards. And I know a lot of people couldn't make it, but did sign up. So we'll send out the recording and a link to a lot of these great resources that you guys compiled.
There was this really strange Temple University in the city of Philadelphia did this study of people's behaviors in waterways related to sewage overflows. And I went to a bunch of meetings about it, and it was revealed that they're literally observing people, writing down their behavior, but not interacting with them and being like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this. But oh, this person's went up to his knees for 2 hours in the thing. I'm writing it down for their report. It's you should have just said something.
One thing I should mention related to recreating and enjoying our local waterways is Clean Air Council is involved in a campaign right now with other organizations, including Penn Future, Delaware Riverkeeper Network, Environment New Jersey, to advocate for improved regulations for the Delaware River, for water quality regulations in the Delaware River. Right now, the Delaware River is only regulated, the fecal coliform standards, they're regulated only strictly enough to protect people who participate in secondary contact recreation is the technical term. So that's people who are fishing or playing on the shoreline. But as we all know, there are people kayaking in the Delaware River along Philly and Camden. There are people doing stand-up paddleboarding, and paddleboard yoga, and people out on the river all the time, and of all ages, of all skill levels. People fall in off their paddle boards or tip in their kayak, and so Clean Air Council is advocating for the regulations to protect primary contact recreation. So recreation that would where someone might become submerged in the water or ingest water. And so we have a petition on our website. If you go to our website and go to take action, you'll see, if you scroll down, there's a petition to call on the Delaware River Basin Commission and the states of Pennsylvania and New Jersey to upgrade the water quality standards to protect everyone who enjoys primary contact recreation in the stretch of the river from Philadelphia and Camden down to Chester.
I have another question this time. Is anyone actively looking at what the Philadelphia Water Department is doing with green stormwater infrastructure and seeing, is it making a difference in the amount of pollutants going into the creeks?
Eastwick had been trying to declare themselves, a FEMA flood zone since last summer. They really got flooded last summer. People are predicting a really nasty hurricane season upcoming. I don't want to speak for the water department,
Yeah.
and it's hard to quantify these types of things. But they do keep doing cool projects. I would like more of them, specifically in Eastwick. And I know that the water department just got a very large Penvest grant. So they had $100 million to upgrade the sewer treatment facility in Northeast Philly, and then they got another $7 million to do green stormwater infrastructure throughout the city.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're doing it, and I think one of the really important things about green stormwater infrastructure is it has so many other benefits. It's not, it's just good to have green stuff.
Yeah.
And ecological diversity, and Jack was talking about rain gardens, and that's a cool thing, just to have some ecology, different types of ecology on your lawn, just not have a regular lawn. So there's all sorts of cool. My all-time favorite GSI thing in Philly is how they redid the 40th Street trolley portal. If you're ever there, it's all pervious brick pavement, lots of cool plants and super pollinator gardens. It's just the coolest thing. And then down the street, right where I live, and not to hype up University of the Sciences because they're playing a big role in gentrification in West Philly. But they did do a really cool GSI project at their dormitory at 46 and Woodland. No shortage of cool GSI projects in the city, but yes, I would like more of them, please.
Yeah, after the hurricane last year, the amount of trash and in the creek, I'm on Cobbs, but I live in the beginning of Eastwick, and Cobbs and Darby, it was unbelievable. And that's one issue, the trash from stormwater, and if there's any way to capture it before it I mean, I think you saw what happened at Hines. And it was all, it's all over the, you know, the creek, the creeks, I should say. Plus the constant issue of sewage in the water. And, you know, so just wondering, I mean, it's still a huge problem and it will become more if we have more flooding. So
Yeah, that's a message that, you know, I personally try to share, is that, you know, just the other day I had someone talk about how much trash they saw at Hines, and I was like, you know what, that's really all of that's the whole watershed's trash. You know, that belongs to all of us. It's not that their local problem, it's our entire watershed's problem. We just, you know, the upper watershed just has, you know, the luxury of not being able, you know, it gets washed away. And so I try to spread that message that it belongs to all of us.
I wouldn't even say there's any luxury, because like where we are at, I mean, if you were to examine the land from the creek flooding, you'll find a constant layer of plastic. It's all over. I mean, the worst accumulated at Hines, but it's all over Cobb's. And there's parts of Cobb's that are not touched. They have no upkeep. And if you go down to the creek, you'll see how bad it is. So.
Yeah, on the topic of plastic, we're lucky to be joined one of our viewers here. I don't want to out him, but he's one of our foremost advocates against plastic pollution. As you may know, that there is a plastic bag ban that was up for vote in Philadelphia, Presley, you might have to correct me on the ins and outs, but it was there.
And Logan will correct me.
Yeah, there was. I think that a plastic bag ban was it adopted and then pulled back from being adopted during 2020, but it's back up for regardless. It's still up for consideration. This plastic bag ban to be instituted in Philadelphia, and plastic bag bans, you know, they can be adopted in each municipality, and it's so important just to, you know, for across this region to have those bans adopted, so that we're not seeing that plastic just littering our waterways and all along the neighborhoods and streams.
Yeah. And it was such baloney when the city said, and then now, you know, the state's preempting them, and like, you know, Logan is literally involved in the lawsuit about the state preemption of the city's ban. But it was just really frustrating to me that the city of Philadelphia, you know, did that one, like, oh, because of COVID, we're going to delay this by a year. And then I get off the train in Wilmington and there's no bags and there's a sign, and it was like, you know, it's like early quarantine. So this whole idea of like, you know, oh, because of COVID, we can't do this. Like plenty of other places are going right ahead.
Logan just dropped in the chat. Is the law right now it will be effective in July, and the city will be issuing tickets starting in October. That's wonderful.
That's going to be fun when you're, you know, all of a sudden we're making plastic bag reports and complaints. Look forward to that, everyone. Next webinar.
I would also like to see the city do a large media campaign for no littering, where they show the effects on the creeks. So I know a lot of people just don't understand, and litter is so bad. And I mean, like, what a lot of what we see washed up are bottles, plastic bottles, but I mean, tons of things get washed up. But anyway, I'd love to see that, so that a real public education on where where your trash is going when it rains.
If they are at all serious about this so-called Green New Deal, a national bottle return program would be very, very high on my list.
That's great. Yeah.
And like, ask Michigan how they do it. Ask Maine how, look at the back of that can and think about how, 5 or 10 states are paying people to recycle.
Mhm.
Looks like we might be out of questions. I just want to say thank you again to Russell, Jack, and Eve. You guys were great, and just like I already said, so much good information that it was almost a little overwhelming. So there's so many good tools and so many things you can do, which is the good news here, right? And that you guys will continue to be resources if it does feel overwhelming for anyone, and DCVA as well. So the message, I think, is just reach out. So thank you guys. And do you have anything else to wrap it up?
It's overwhelming for us too, and
Yeah.
we talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So
Thank you.
everyone, and
All
thank
right.
you, Aurora.
That's it for the night. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.